Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for coming to tonight's seminar. I'm Simon Young. I'm a teacher in this faculty, and it brings me great pleasure to welcome our guest tonight, Mr. Sam Chang, who is from Taiwan and has had a very distinguished career as an investment banker, but that's not why he's here today. It's his more recent activities in thinking about elections and election methods, and in particular this idea of negative voting, which I'll leave to him to explain tonight. But I'll have to say that after I heard more about it, it's extremely intriguing, whether you agree with it or not. I think it holds a lot of promise and will certainly lead to a lot of discussion. He is the president of the Negative Voting Association, which he founded not too long ago. And he tells me that there are at least 45 voting members based in Taiwan. I'll leave it to him also to tell you about the association. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Chang.
Thank you, Simon. And a special thanks to Pooja, who arranged this. And thank you, members of the audience. I know it's pretty bad weather out there. So thank you for braving the weather to come over to listen to my presentation. I believe the negative vote concept is very important and should be adopted in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in China, or any other country that aspires to have true democracy. And I hope at the end of my presentation, some of you will share that belief as well. So what is negative vote? In all elections in the world today, this is basically what a ballot might look like. If you like someone, you choose the candidate you like. But what if you do not like any of the candidates? What is your choice today? You stay at home, not go to the polls, or you hold your nose and pick the lesser of two evils. We don't think that is a satisfactory solution. So what is negative vote? Negative vote is a vote against the candidate. Each person still has one vote, but you have the choice to say no. This is pretty easy to understand if there's only one candidate. Suppose there's only one candidate and you can only say yes. You might think you live in North Korea. So, other than North Korea, do we have examples where there's only one candidate in elections? Of course there are. I've learned in Hong Kong there are such examples. In Taiwan, we had a local election in 2014. 38% of village wardens, or almost 3,000 persons, had no competition. Now, I believe strongly in most of these situations, these candidates are so loved by their neighbors that no one wants to come out to compete. But it is also pretty common knowledge in Taiwan that some of these village wardens are the local gangster bosses who no one dared to compete against. So if there's only one candidate, I, as a voter, should have the right to say no. I think that's very easy to understand for everybody. Does the logic extend to 2 or more candidates? We say, of course. What if the gangster boss can have one of his lieutenants to run along with him? You still end up picking someone you dislike, or he gets 1 or 2 votes, he gets elected. That is not true democracy. So we believe quite strongly the current system that only allow you to say yes is an incomplete democracy. So how can negative vote improve democracy other than this basic right? If we have the choice to say no, for sure, voter participation will increase. If voter participation can increase without coercion or without financial incentive, in other words, if voter participation can increase on a voluntary basis, by definition, that is improvement for democracy. More people will participate, and the results will more clearly reflect more people's views. The clarity part is also very important. In a typical election today, let's say you have 2 candidates. The winner very often arrogantly proclaims, I have majority support. I have the mandate of the people. We heard that often. But that's simply not true. Many people did not go to the polls because they didn't like either candidate. Some of the people probably voted for the winner because the other one was disliked even more. So if we have this choice to vote no, it's very unlikely for the winner to have so-called majority support. And in such a situation, wouldn't the winner have to be more humble? We think that's good for democracy also. For the last presidential election in Taiwan, we conducted Gallup poll to do some research to measure the potential impact of negative vote. By the way, this is the first ever, or the only one we know about, that's number-based research on the concept of negative vote. The only one we know about in the world. So this chart shows you first what the typical poll would look like in an election. You know, Taiwan gets 42%, way ahead of all the other candidates. So sure we'll win, you know, if this poll is accurate. This poll was conducted early December, right after all the candidates were officially announced and registered with the Central Election Commission. So this poll result basically is reflective of what all other polls basically showed. Taiwan was way ahead. Of course, our poll is a little different. We not only asked this question, we also asked, what if you have the ability to cast a no vote? What would the result be? Very dramatic difference. You can see that the KMT candidate gets more negative votes than positive votes. This was very shocking to us. I think it was shocking to most people who saw this. KMT, for those who are familiar with Taiwan, has been the dominant political party for many decades. But this poll shows the KMT candidate would receive net negative votes. The other thing that's very interesting about this poll result, remember the last chart, Tsai Ing-wen, the DPP candidate, gets 42%. In this chart, she only gets 28% support. In addition to that, there's 6% vote against her. So, yes, she will win the election, but I will submit a president that gets 42% versus net 22% would think and also behave quite differently. That's good for democracy. She should be more humble. I circle this total decided voter as compared to the previous one. 66%, 71%. The difference is 5.4%. This one basically summarizes the previous two charts. The 5.4% basically reflects what we believe. If we have the choice to vote no, voter participation will increase by 5.4% for Taiwan under those circumstances, under those selection of candidates. What does 5.4% mean for Taiwan? That's 1 million more voters coming out to vote. That is an improvement for democracy. Another reason that we think negative vote is very important is that we believe strongly it will reduce the influence of extremist candidates. Because there is only one vote, no political party or politician will be so stupid as to encourage supporters to go out and cast no votes. If you do that, you don't get the yes votes that your supporters were supposed to vote for you. So all candidates, political parties, will ask its loyal supporters to cast yes votes. So who will end up casting no votes, if any? The not so loyal supporters. To us, that means mostly the middle electorate. And because you only have one vote, whom are you going to cast your no vote against? Of course, it will be cast against those people you dislike the most, the extremists, or the worst politicians you despise the most. And if because of this, extreme candidates cannot win, of course extreme rhetoric will be reduced. In any society, if you can somehow reduce the extreme rhetoric, the society should become more harmonious internally and less likely to go to war against its neighbors. So what we are proposing here is not just an improvement in democracy. It can have an impact on improving the prospect for world peace. Examples of where negative vote might apply. Everybody knows, right? Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are leading candidates for their respective parties. But we have found also Gallup poll had done this disapproval rating. Hillary has 52% disapproval, and Donald Trump broke all record, 60% disapproval. In addition to the United States, where else do you think negative vote would be good, should be implemented, or is badly needed? Let me give you an example of Israel. I visited Israel several times for business reasons, and during one of those trips, a local Israeli friend told me a story. In Israel, everybody knows that whether you're a man or woman, you are subject to a military draft. But he said that there's a small group of people who are not. I didn't know that before. I said, tell me about it. He said that during the independence war for Israel, a group of fundamentalist religious Jewish leaders went to see Ben-Gurion, the father of Israel, and requested that students from their religious schools to be exempt from military service for religious reasons. And because there were only a few hundred back then, so Ben-Gurion agreed. Later on, laws were passed to exempt this particular group of people. And of course, there are more than a few hundred now. My Israeli friend is particularly frustrated with this group of people. According to him, this is his views, he said that they are the ones who make all the trouble. They are the ones who refuse to have peace with the Palestinians. They are the ones who went over to occupy lands. And yet, when trouble starts, my children have to go to war, their children don't. That is simply not fair. But he could do nothing about it, because this group is also quite cohesive, and they always win in elections. They always are there in the parliament. Therefore, they have a disproportional influence on Israeli national policy. What if people like my friend in Israel can vote no? Wouldn't this particular group's influence be reduced? Wouldn't that be good for world peace? So why should we have negative votes? We think it's a basic human right to be able to say no. It's a fundamental cornerstone of democracy. Current election system that doesn't allow you to say no is simply not complete, not a complete choice. It will increase voter participation for sure. That's good for democracy. It will reduce the influence of extremists. Let me explain in more detail by numbers, giving you an example. Suppose there are two candidates. Let's assume these are the votes. A gets 34, B gets 33. And the current rules, A wins with a majority vote. So A can claim, I have overwhelming majority support. I have the mandate. What if we can introduce negative votes? More voters come in to vote. Let's suppose there are 33 more people came in to vote and split their votes. 22 against A, 11 against B. Now B wins. B wins and cannot claim he has majority support. This result reflects more people's views and also more clearly what people think about the candidates. This is more democratic. Suppose there are 3 candidates. Again, without negative vote, A wins. With negative vote, potentially you could have C win. With more people participating and also showing their views more clearly. I want to give you more example of research that's done in Taiwan. We want to test whether negative vote can actually affect the outcome of the election, as hypothetically I've shown before. So we picked a particular district in Taiwan, the Hsinchu City District. The reason we picked that district was twofold, basically. One, all posters, all the different posts have shown this is a highly contested district where it's not clear who was going to win. In addition to that, one of the leading candidates, the DPP candidate, Mr. Kerr in here, he was the most well-known candidate among the legislative yuan members in Taiwan. He is now the DPP leader in parliament. Okay. So we selected this district. This chart shows, yes, it reflects the top 2 candidates are basically neck and neck, and the difference is within the margin of error of doing polls. However, if the negative vote concept is introduced, notice Mr. Kerr gets more than 9% negative votes. What does that mean? That means if negative vote is available, Mr. Kerr will drop to the 3rd place. You don't win election by being number 3. However, this is the actual result of the Hsinchu City election. Total effective votes, a little over 200,000. Mr. Kerr won. He won as a he got the most votes. Okay? I'm not suggesting that Mr. Kerr should not have won the election. That's what I'm suggesting. He won fair and square under the current rules. But suppose negative vote was available and 9.8% people choose to vote against him. If you apply the percentage, he wouldn't win. This person is now the most powerful leader in our parliament. But I think we can raise this legitimate question. Had people been given a complete choice whether or not he might get elected? I want to show you a little more research that we have done in Taiwan. We also have, during the last presidential election, we have votes that we can cast for political parties. Now, these party votes are very important because 1/3 of the parliamentary seats are based on allocation of the party votes you get. So, in addition to that, we also have political subsidy in Taiwan. Depending on the votes you get, if you pass a certain minimum hurdle, that party will get 50 NT per vote. Now, 50 NT is a little over $1 US. 50 NT per vote each year for the next 4 years. So it's very important, obviously, for each one of these political parties to get as many party votes as possible. You not only get parliamentary seats, you also get money. Without negative vote, these parties will all get quite a bit of allocation of money. And in fact, they did, okay? But what if you have negative votes? Absolutely shocking result. The KMT, the 100-year-old party, will get negative votes. They wouldn't get any of the 1/3 allocation of seats. They wouldn't get any political subsidy for the next 4 years. So, what is the likelihood any of these political parties will come out to support the concept of negative vote? That is our challenge, isn't it? How to change the laws. To change the laws in any country is a very difficult road. We know that. It's a very long road. Can we count on the legislative yuan, the parliament, to change the laws? We don't think so. So how do we go about it? In Taiwan, we believe we have to pursue the option of plebiscite. But that is also a difficult road, because the thresholds established by the parliament is quite high. There are basically 2 steps. The first step is I have to round up 100,000 petitions, signed petitions. And once that succeeds, you have a second hurdle. You have to get another 1 million petitions in order for this issue to be put on the ballot for the population, for the voters to vote on this issue. And the law requires, if this issue is put on the ballot, more than half of the registered voters must participate to express an opinion. For Taiwan, that means 9.4 million people. And over half must approve what you propose to get this passed. So Taiwan has conducted 6 plebiscites before, none got through. So should we be discouraged by this? No. During our last Gallup poll, we also asked all the respondents whether they like this idea, whether they agree with our position that we should change the laws to adopt negative vote. I want to call your attention. Almost 43% agreed, yes, we should change the laws. Now, what does 43% mean? 43% of registered voters in Taiwan would be over 8 million. Tsai Ing-wen, who won the last presidential election, won the election with 6.9 million votes. She got 37% vote of the registered voters. This poll shows even though the respondents didn't have an opportunity, as all of you here, to listen to us why we should have negative votes, the basic ideas already supported in their mind. So we have a lot of confidence that even though there's such strong vested interest against the idea, the population in general will love this idea. So it only takes time. Time to do what? To disseminate, to let more people be aware of this concept. A lot of people always tell us, this is a very difficult road. So I want to share with you this quotation from John F. Kennedy. If it is easy, obviously somebody else would have done it. We do it because it's hard. That's why we're doing it, not someone else. Now I want to share with you thought for Hong Kong, since I'm here in Hong Kong. I'm not familiar with Hong Kong politics, and so I try to catch up a little bit, collecting some data. A friend shared this data with me. Since Facebook started allowing people to show different emotions, it was interesting to see why Leon got 100 times more angry faces than Donald Trump. And this is a poll another friend showed me, his disapproval rate about 63%. But more seriously, can negative vote offer an interim solution to what we observe today, sort of the impasse between Beijing and the desire for universal suffrage in Hong Kong? I understand Beijing wants to control the nomination process. And the people here feel if you control the nomination process, it's not a true democracy. Can negative vote provide sort of interim compromise? Well, many people will say, how can China agree that you will be able to vote no? You will be able to disagree. Surprise. I found an example. In 1999 rural election, in Shanxi province, there's a village called Zhuoli. The party nominated 3 candidates, but the ballot itself had 3 choices: agree and basic agree, and disagree. The voters could disagree. So you can take this example to show to Beijing. In your own elections, you have allowed voters to disagree. Why not Hong Kong? Why shouldn't Hong Kong voters have the power to disagree? So that basically completes my presentation. I'd like to open up to questions, and thank you again for coming to this presentation.
Right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chang. As I said, very intriguing concept, and I'm sure many of you are thinking about the different possibilities. I just want to be very clear about what this proposal is. So you suggest that if there are 2 candidates, right now you basically have a choice of 2 options. But under your proposal, you would have a choice of 4 options, but only 1 sort of vote or 1 tick. And so, in fact, you might still have that sort of same problem. If I do go and vote, and let's say again, I don't like both candidates, I can't fully express that. Right? I can only then, I can only sort of negative the one that I dislike the most. You still sort of have that kind of problem there. But the other question I had for you is, having net negative votes for all candidates is a real prospect, is a real possibility. How do you deal with that? Does that mean no one gets elected and you have to start all over again? Because that could be very disruptive.
Simon, thank you for that question. There are basically two parts. The first part deals with what if you don't like any of the candidates, you can only pick one. There are countries in the world that have the so-called none of the above option. I believe India has that, Brazil has that, Thailand has something like that as well. For short, let's call it NOTA, the NOTA option, none of the above. The NOTA option, we believe, is not as good a choice as having the negative vote option that we are proposing for several reasons. In democracy that we are used to, every vote counts and also has the same weight is important. The NOTA option doesn't give you the same weight. If you can vote no against all the other candidates, that weight is too much. It's more than one. And also for countries that have already adopted, basically they have set some thresholds. If you don't meet that threshold, the NOTA option doesn't count anyway. It counts as 0. So your weight is either 0 or overweight. So you have this weight issue using the NOTA option. The other point that we think is NOTA is unnecessary if you have negative vote is this. Right now, you have NOTA because you don't have this choice to vote no. But once you have the choice to vote no, you don't need it anymore. It will actually dilute the effect of having the no vote option. Right. For example, if you have this choice to vote no, and you can only vote no against one person, you will pick against the person you despise most. That's how you reduce the worst politicians. That's how you reduce the influence of extremists. When you say, I don't like anyone, you can vote no against all of them, you're not really making a choice. The counter choice will be, I like all the candidates. Shouldn't I be able to vote yes for all of them? If you have NOTA, then wouldn't someone argue, hey, I should also vote for all of the above? So NOTA is not a satisfactory solution if you already have the choice to vote no. The next question was, what if all the candidates gets net negative votes? Our proposal is that in that scenario, election must be reheld. And the candidates that have already been rejected by the voters will be barred from participation in the next round. That's fair, right? The political reality, of course, is that if you are already rejected in the last round, no party is going to nominate you again. The other political reality is, under most democratic systems today, the chance of all the candidates get net negative votes is actually very, very low. The probability is very, very low. For example, we estimated in Taiwan that if given a choice, voters might cast negative votes, but it wouldn't be more than 1/3. And indeed, our research showed it will be about 25% to 1/3, no more than 1/3. But among those who cast negative votes, they will also split the negative votes among different candidates. So the probability no one wins because all candidates get negative votes is actually extremely low. I think that's a reality. So that probability, yes, it exists, but it's so low, actually, I don't think we need to worry about it.
All right. Other questions? It's this gentleman here, yes.
It's a very intriguing idea, as the chairman said. But I was also intrigued by your example of the 1999 April election in some village in China. Now, that was 16 years ago, almost. So what has happened since then? Is any other village has done that, or is that the only example you have, or is there any other example since then?
I'm not a political scientist. I never even took a political science class. So this matter will need to be researched more by different authorities and so forth, and I hope somebody can come up with more research on this issue. I use an example with the idea of hoping that Beijing will somehow get the message that they already practice this. I sort of half-jokingly have put this idea up in China's Weibo, saying that in the election or the appointment, however you want to call it, of the supreme leader in China, I don't know how it's done. Nobody knows how it's done, right? But in their selection of the supreme leader in China, I have to presume in the Central Political Politburo, they already have the mechanism to express objection. And I make an assumption by citing the Bo Xilai example. He was very powerful in the Politburo, but somebody had decided, or some people was able to somehow get him, ease him out of that central authority by expressing objection. So I believe, yeah, China to some extent already allows the idea of saying no. And interestingly, my wife showed me an election of apartment superintendent. The ballot showed you can vote no. So the idea is not such an outrageous idea. And I certainly hope more and more area in the world would adopt it. This question often come up, where in the world has this been practiced? Our research has shown nowhere. We haven't found an example, except for Armenia. That's right. Armenia, we found this example in Armenia where in the Armenia election code, you can vote no if there's only one candidate. That's the only example we could find. When there's only one candidate, you can vote no. And by the way, European Union is against it. European Union in their evaluation of Armenia election law saying, that's not right. You should have more candidates. You shouldn't have just one candidate.
Other comments or questions? Yes.
In the scenario, there's multiple candidates. So after net off, okay, negative, and see. So the only candidate which is have the higher vote is 0 because the net of 0. The rest is all negative. So with that 0 still got elected in theory.
Our proposal is that if you don't get any net positive votes, you don't get elected. But your question actually leads to another logical question. Is suppose you get only 1 vote, right? All the others get net negative. Should you get elected? This raises the issue of whether you should have minimum thresholds. In our draft proposal for revision of election laws in Taiwan, by the way, there are 2 laws governing elections in Taiwan. One governs the presidential and vice presidential candidates. The other one governs everybody else. Okay. Our position is that in the presidential election, if we revise the laws to allow negative vote, you probably should add in a minimum threshold. Our proposal is 10%. Now whoever wins should have not only net positive votes, but also gross positive votes being more than 10%. Okay, that's our proposal. This can be discussed. What minimum thresholds appropriate, I believe, needs to be talked about, and different localities, different countries would have a different standard, perhaps, feel what percentage threshold is necessary. For example, we know South Africa and Singapore, it's dominated by a single party. So the population's accustomed to very high threshold winners. So if they set the threshold, they might want to set it higher. In a multi-party system like Israel or France, you might want to have a lower threshold. We also take the position that for Taiwan, revising the presidential laws, election laws, is not the priority, because that is a very highly visible position, and we have pretty free press media. So whoever aspires to become the president gets very detailed examination, okay, by the media. So we're not too worried about that person being elected not representative enough. But for the other posts, we believe that's the priority, to make changes in laws, especially what I have cited, the village warden elections. And in those situations, do we need to set minimum thresholds? For Taiwan, I don't think we need to, mainly because the current election laws already has a lot of restrictions in the nomination process. These restrictions, these thresholds already means quite a bit of obstacle if you want to participate. It's both monetary and also percentage of votes and so forth. So we don't think it's necessary for Taiwan in the other election law for all the other posts. But again, that's for Taiwan. For every other country, you might want to think about whether you need to set a threshold.
I have a question that relates to a point that you raised in your presentation. At one point in your presentation, you analyzed that in any election with a negative voting arrangement, the point of capturing the so-called swing votes would become even more important, because one would assume that the base voters would actually support, give their votes to the candidate that is proposed by the party. So my question is, has your organization actually digged into the how negative voting would actually affect political campaigning, in particular with regard to negative campaigning? Because obviously, if you want to capture those swing votes, you might have to resort to negative campaigning. And so that's the first part of my question. And secondly is, if that leads to the increase of negative campaigning, then whether that would actually generate a need to reform certain election laws that has to do with, for example, the prohibition against certain types or certain ways of conducting negative campaigning. So that's my question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you. We have, in my presentations in Taiwan, we have also heard this sort of commentary or question quite often. Vice President of our organization, Mr. Feng, had written an article on negative vote back in 2004 in Chinese. It was never published, but it's now available on our website. So if you read Chinese, you can look it up. He had commented on this particular issue quite extensively. I think he wrote up more than 5,000 words on the subject. Okay, so I will try to answer this in a short way. In almost all elections today, there's a lot of negative campaign already. That's apparent. Right? If you look at U.S. election, you look at Taiwan election, you look at elections everywhere. Negative campaign already exists, and it's quite rampant. It's quite irresponsible. As a voter, what can you do about it today? Nothing. Basically nothing. And why do people do it? Precisely because you cannot do nothing. You can do nothing about it. If you are a candidate today, under the current system, most of the time, you only need to appeal to your basic loyal supporters to win. You don't have to worry about the middle electorate. Look at Donald Trump. Right? He appeals to a small group of people, but he has a prospect of winning the Republican nomination. He doesn't have to worry about the middle electorate, how they think. So in the election system today, if you are a candidate, you attack the opponent and try to smear him. Your loyal supporters will not change. They will still vote for you. But your smear tactics might possibly reduce the support of the other person. All gain, no loss. That's why everybody does it, to some extent. And middle electorate gets so frustrated. So you hear this often, right? I hate politics. I don't like any of these politicians. You hear that so often. We get discouraged because I can do nothing about it. They win. They win on those tactics. But what if I can say no? I, as a middle of the way voters, I hate people who conduct smear tactics. I might vote against them. So in future elections, where this option is available, the candidate must worry whether the middle electorate will come out in large numbers. But it doesn't even have to be large numbers. In a close election, even small numbers can change the tide. Whether the middle electorate will come out to vote against him or for him. And what does the middle electorate care? We care about whether you're bringing actual beef to the table, not how you smear the other guys. That's what we care about. So in order to win my vote as middle electorate, you have to persuade me on merits, not your smear tactics. If you use smear tactics, I might vote against you. And my vote actually becomes quite important to you now. So in order to win my vote, you need to change your tactics. So we believe quite strongly that if we have this option, election campaign tactics will also improve. Negative campaign will be reduced. And if negative campaign is reduced in order to win the hearts and minds of the middle electorate, then the middle electorate will not need to cast negative votes anymore. I can vote on the basis of merit, pick the one that has a better policy proposal. I will go on and cast positive votes. So our organization, even though we are called the Negative Vote Association, our objective, our aspiration, our vision is not to encourage all the voters to go out and cast negative votes. Just the opposite. We hope because we have this choice, election campaign will be reduced. The worst politicians, the bad politicians will be weeded out, and then we have elections of good candidates. And I can go out and vote for the good candidates. That's our aspiration.
But what is the fate of your proposal in Taiwan? Do you have many people supporting this idea, or are you just hoping?
We formed the organization only last year in March. So we're 1 year young. And during this process, the first challenge, obviously, to let more people know about this concept. In that effort, we are, of course, using the internet, using Facebook, using mobile devices to try to deliver our messages to as many people as possible. And we conducted these Gallup research data to establish the research database to support our views. As I said, we are very encouraged by the results so far, where the poll shows if this is available, a lot of people would agree changing the laws. And also encouraged by other indications. For example, we have created a very short cartoon video. It's a 3-minute video. You can look it up. There are two versions. One is negative vote Chinese, the other is negative vote English, all in one word. It's available on YouTube. The Chinese version had been clipped 246,000 times or plus. Okay. Now on YouTube, you can, if you want to express an opinion, you can do this or this. Right? On YouTube you can, not on Facebook. And typically on YouTube, when you get a reaction, the people that react may be only 1% of the number of clicks. So on YouTube, we can see these statistics. Among those who express an opinion, it's I think less than 4,000. We have 93% approval of this idea, 7% against. So we have reasons to be optimistic. Let me give you other examples why we have reasons to be optimistic. Former Premier of Taiwan, Chang, had written a long article published in the leading newspaper in Taiwan to explain why this is a good idea. I have that in English as well, if you're interested. I translated that into English. His title is "To be able to say no makes happy democracy." Okay. A newspaper columnist, whose column is widely read in Taiwan, he had written 3 columns to support negative vote. He's also one of our founders of the association. The leading law firm in Taiwan. It's called Lee and Lee. Head of Lee and Lee, C.V. Chang, had also written a very long article to support negative vote. Former DPP chairman, Democratic Progressive Party chairman, Mr. Shi Mingde, he is also a co-founder of this organization. Former Minister of Justice supports the idea. The former chairman of Central Election Commission in Taiwan, Mr. Huang, has also come out publicly to support this idea. And we will get more, more and more support of people of influence. I am a nobody, really. I have no background in politics. So we have reasons to be optimistic, but this will take time. This takes time for more people to learn about it, and it takes time to change the views of legislators.
It's a very negative concept. I mean, why would the electorate come out to vote no? Right now, I feel like I would vote no for both of the candidates that are leading in the United States, right? But that's a very negative concept, and you can't expect to promote an election campaign on the basis of that negativism. So this is my doubt about your proposal. Granted, we need changes in all electoral systems, but I'm not sure that this is the way to go.
Okay, I would disagree with the view that it's negativism, even though the name is negative vote. The name is probably not the best name, can come up with. One professor in the United States that I have the email discussion with, Stephen Graham, he has devoted his entire life to election reform. He had also suggested that we should change the name to approval, disapproval, which will be
Yes, no voting. Yeah.
right. Yeah, approval, disapproval voting system. Yeah, I would say what we're proposing, even though the name's negative, what we're proposing is extremely positive idea. It's the impact also that's going to be extremely positive. As I cited before in my presentation, you have more voter participation. You have the voters being able to clearly express preferences. And I come back to the basic appeal or the basic quest we're saying. We think it's a fundamental right of the voters. I, as a voter, shouldn't be compelled to only vote yes. Why shouldn't I have the no option? It's a basic right. That's the way I see it.
Or not vote at all.
Or not vote at all. Not voting at all is already an option.
You cast a blank vote. I mean, that's better than voting no. You vote,
How is that better?
because you vote no when you have no other recourse, you have no other candidates, and so you're helpless. So all you can do is say, I don't like this person. And it seems to me it would be very difficult to mobilize an electorate to come out and vote if that is their only option. They have they don't like any of the candidates, so all they can do is say, I don't like this candidate more than others. And why would people come out and even bother? I would think that fewer people would vote, not more people would vote.
The data says more people will come out to vote. That's why we did a Gallup research. Remember what we're saying is it's changing the ballot itself so that you have the choice. Right now you don't have that choice, right? We're saying it's changing the ballot itself so that you have this additional choice of ticking the no box instead of the yes box. So if you are a voter, under the current system, you go vote for the candidate you like. You will go and vote. But under the current system, if you don't like any candidates, you choose to stay at home. That's what a lot of people do. What we're saying is that if you want to vote for someone, yeah, that choice is already there. We're not saying you cannot vote yes. We're saying the people who don't have the choice to vote no now, because of this additional choice, they would come out to vote as well. That's why we have an increase in voter participation. So this is what we think is a huge improvement for democracy. Additional people coming to vote. If you vote yes, I have not taken away your right to vote yes. I'm giving you, or we're proposing, the system should give those people who don't like any candidate the same choice as the people who like candidates. That's what we're saying.
So did you want to say something about some of your ideas of maybe implementing this in the student union elections?
Well, yes. Simon's asked whether it should be implemented in student elections. Absolutely. I think this applies to any group that conducts an election for somebody. You know, changing the laws for any country is difficult, so why not start in student unions? Start at Hong Kong U. Start in your student union to introduce the idea. You don't need to change the laws to do that. Start from grammar school. When you elect the class president, right? Why not? As these younger generation people practice this in their student union votes, once they step into the society and have the political vote, they will be surprised they don't have it. They will be a force of change. They will demand it. And indeed, in our poll that we conducted, you can see a much higher percentage of agreement among the younger generation that we should have this right, the right to say no. Yes.
I'm trying hard to keep an open mind on what you've been saying, which is very intriguing and stimulating. But I have a few comments, not necessarily coherent. First of all, I think there are precedents in casting negative votes, which is we hear rumors about very private clubs where they have a system of blackballing candidates who are trying to gain membership. And I think in those situations, because they feel that it's very important in a very close community that the people who get admitted have to be, you know, sort of very well, at least not unpopular. All right, not popular. So that's the first point. The second point is that I was mulling over whether, following your system, we will end up with a candidate who is mediocre, who is not impressive, but at the same time is because he's so wishy-washy that nobody really hates him enough to give him sufficient negative votes. So is that really the kind of system that we would want? I mean, that's what I'm thinking about. And a third point is about the negative campaigning, which was my concern, because I think we have to consider very carefully the values which this kind of system might be encouraging. Because if we have a society where, you know, sort of people are engaged in thinking up how to attack the other person, not that it doesn't happen at present, as you said, rightly say, but then this negative voting system would legitimate the whole process of smearing. And there's just something fundamental in me which seems to cry out no against that. And it's more than just the name, if we think of communities spending a lot of effort in doing that kind of exercise, we might be bringing the whole culture downwards rather than upwards, which is, I think, a responsibility for our generation. But having said all that, I would be very curious if, say, Hong Kong U Students' Union might be willing to spend 1 year as a sort of a clinical experiment to see how it works out. Because after all, everything in Hong Kong, now it's in a real flux. Nobody really knows where it is. So I'm hoping that somebody courageous would say, let's try it for 1 year, see what the results are. Because I think it's relatively difficult in the bigger world, for any politician to be
to endorse this idea.
Yes, to endorse this, because there's huge responsibility in bringing this. But whereas if we did it, sort of in a laboratory, so to speak, that could be something which Hong Kong U students would be doing a huge favor to the whole world,
Yes.
not only in Hong Kong. And my last point is this: even though my pendulum is still towards the negative side, towards your negative voting system, I'm trying to think whether this would be one of the stimulating debates for breaking the stalemate in having Beijing nominate our chief executive. Because in that situation, I'm not lobbying for the whole LegCo to be done in this way, but I think if we, sort of focus in on the stalemate which we have, and there seems to be no one very wise way where everybody agrees to be able to break the impasse. So this might be a point for society's consideration, and I think it would be a worthwhile suggestion to be thrown open for Hong Kong to consider.
Yeah, I fully agree with your last point. That's why I made this point in the slide as well. But let me address one issue you have raised that I have not addressed earlier, the mediocre issue. What we are proposing is quite obviously nonpartisan. Right? What we're proposing is a systematic change. So you can say our proposal is basically politically neutral, middle of the road proposal. It's not far left or far right. It's middle of the road proposal. Middle of the road does not mean mediocre. That's true for ideas. That's true for politicians as well. A politician who is a middle of the road person does not necessarily mean mediocre or not innovative or not progressive. Our proposal demonstrates that. What we're proposing, I think, is revolutionary, it's progressive, it is also middle of the road. It's not a mediocre proposal. So I wouldn't equate the idea of getting rid of bad politician extremism means you would end up with mediocre politicians. That connection is not there, in my opinion. Okay, let's address basically your second point. Your third point is about negative campaign. This is basically a debate on logic. Cannot be proven by scientific research whether your concern of increased campaign is correct, negative campaign is correct, or our view that will reduce negative campaign is correct. There's no scientific research you can do that demonstrate whether you are right or I'm right. We believe strongly that by logic discussion, that negative campaign will be reduced. How to prove whether you are right or I'm right? The only way is by experimenting in actual elections. That's why we also propose for the changing laws. There are a lot of people who share those kind of concerns. So let's adopt changes gradually. For Taiwan, for example, I cited an example where these village wardens, you have only one candidate they get elected. Let's start there. Allow negative vote there, right? Starting with allowing negative vote in village warden elections in Taiwan. Same thing in Hong Kong. Let's start allowing negative vote for the very local elections in Hong Kong. Now, let's not jump all the way to the chief executive or jump all the way to president in Taiwan. Let's start with these very local elections where you have only one candidate. Start at that level, change the laws, and see what effect it would have. Let's do that in every country, in local elections. I don't think we can discuss this and debate this, and we simply cannot produce a scientific research to show who is right. There's no way to do that.
Yes. I think with the new system that you are going to propose, it will be extremely difficult for anyone to get re-elected after his first term of office. Look at Obama. He will never get re-elected because all the incumbent presidents or legislators during the term of office, his or her opponent is going to go all out to smear him and get his reputation down. And if you look at the poll for Obama, after his first term, his popularity drops. Everybody drops once you are in office. So have your group considered that?
Yes, I disagree with that view. I cited an example. Remember I said former commission of the Central Election Commission and the former chairman, Mr. Huang, he's now 80 years old, right? He was twice the chairman of Central Election Commission in Taiwan. He doesn't belong to any political party. That's a very rare politician in Taiwan. Okay, he's not KMT, he's a DPP. He doesn't belong to any political party. He was, at one time, the magistrate for the Changhua County in Taiwan, a fairly large magistrate. He won the first term. For the second term, he won 90% votes. He was so well respected because he's not your typical politician. He really does what's good for the people. So he had no significant competitor in the re-election of this particular person.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you.
So I wouldn't automatically jump to this conclusion that the incumbent will not get re-elected. If you actually seriously serve the people well, the people will respond. That's our faith. That's our faith in democracy.
Sorry, just one last follow-up. I think this discussion has been very interesting because it actually throws open an age-old question, namely whether voters are rational or are they actually not rational voters. Because according to your analysis, and I think you're siding with the more optimistic view on voters, is that they're rational and therefore you say that negative campaigning would be reduced by having this arrangement. And perhaps I'm taking a more pessimistic view and therefore I think that it will actually increase negative campaigning. So would you actually consider taking into account the fact that there might be irrational voters out there, that there might even be nihilistic voters out there who doesn't really want a better future and they just want to disrupt and cause changes to the status quo? And how does that actually affect the actual implementation of your scheme of actually bettering the election system?
That's also a very good question. When we discuss improvements in democratic systems, I think we have a general assumption that voters have the wisdom, voters have the rationality to make the best choice possible, and every voter counts. In a society, are there irrational people? Of course there are, right? But when we discuss a system, we have to have this basic assumption. In the democracy, we assume most of the people will be rational and have the wisdom to make the best choice for themselves. If you don't believe that, you basically throw out democracy, right? That's the kind of argument for dictatorship, benign dictatorship, because people are stupid, people are irrational, people cannot make the best choices. We strongly believe democracy is still the best system. It needs to be improved, for sure, but we have faith that is still the best system. There's nothing better. And we're trying to improve it. We're trying to fill up the deficiencies. One very wise man, the first president of this organization, has said, Mr. Shiminde has said, democracy, or the strive for better democracy, can never end. You always have to strive for a better democracy. And that effort has come from the population. Those who are in power do not like it. They will do whatever they can to prevent the people having more say. That's why that effort can never stop.
I think that's a good note to close on. Of course, when we had our political reform debate 2 years ago or last year, there was some talk about NOTA, right? In fact, my colleague Albert Chen was an advocate of the NOTA. But I don't recall anyone proposing what you're proposing, Sam. And so I do think it's definitely something that we should think about for whenever we have the next discussion on political reform. And I do hope that maybe we can get more tests of the system. And I think you have a Facebook page, you've got some other online media where you're constantly updating news, so we can follow that. And I have to say that I think the more I hear about the system, the more attractive and interesting it becomes. And obviously tonight it's been extremely engaging evening. And I just want to say on behalf of the university, Mr. Chang, thank you very much for coming all this way to talk to us about your proposal. And may I ask everyone in the room to join me in thanking Mr. Chang.
Thank you, Simon. Now, I'd like to take a very quick poll. Now you have heard it. How many people like the idea? Show your hands, please. How many people think there's a lot of problem with this idea? Show your hands. Okay, so it's about equal. Yeah. So it's certainly worthwhile to think about, to debate, and as Simon said, come to join us on Negative Vote International as an English page. We hope more people will join us to discuss this concept.
No, you need a pilot project. I mean,
Yes.
can't you just have one or two villages in Taiwan that do this? Because we have to see how it works before we can make an informed decision whether we're up or down. Is it possible to do a pilot project in Taiwan?
I'm pinning my hope in California, actually, because in Taiwan, as I showed you, it's so difficult to change the laws. The plebiscite threshold.
You don't have to change the whole law. Just find some reformist village leader who will go along with
Well,
it.
that requires changing the laws.
Well, in that village, you mean you cannot do it in one or two places?
No, you cannot. You have to change the laws to make the results lawful. And in California, I was told, it only requires 6,000 signatures to put this issue on the ballot. In Taiwan, it requires 1 million signatures to put this issue on the ballot. So I'm putting my hope on California.
But certainly researching that village in mainland China is definitely worth doing, and to find out what happened there,
Yeah.
and whether it's been
Whether it has been repeated, repeated elsewhere.
All right. Well, thank you,
All right,
everyone.
thank you.
I'm having a gift for you.
I'd like to know more about that.